This is Joseph Carpenter. Today is June 28th, 2024, and I'm interviewing Patrick Nugent. The interview is taking place on the campus of the University of Texas at Arlington, is sponsored by the UTA Department of History and Geography, and is part of the Texas Veterans Project. Thank you for agreeing to be interviewed today,
Oh,
sir.
my pleasure.
Tell me, where are you from originally, and what can you tell me about your growing up?
I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois, born and raised in the city.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the oldest of 6 children, 3 boys, 3 girls.
Wow.
And the first 4 are 1 year apart, and then we have a 5-year break, 1 5-year break, another one. So,
Oh, my goodness.
pretty busy household.
Yes.
During school, I went to grade school, high school, and then upon graduation from high school, I enlisted in the Air Force. And I graduated on a Sunday and was on active duty on a Monday morning.
Is that right?
Yes, in June of 1969.
Were you involved in any sort of military type activities in high school?
No, not at all. I was the high school team manager for basketball and football, and the trainer for both as well, doing all the taping and things of that nature. Then some babysitting on the side of my own family.
I'm sure, yes. What did your father do for a living?
My father is ex-Army, and but then when he left the Army, he joined the post office. He was a postal carrier for 35 or 38 years or something of that nature.
And your mother, did she work outside the home?
She did at the beginning, but with the children, no. But she was a registered nurse.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So what inspired you to join the military?
Well, a variety of things. I wanted to go to a specific university, and the opportunity didn't surface. My coaches were going to help me get into another university. It was the height of the Vietnam War. And I said, well, I don't know if I want to go. I kind of was, stubborn. I said, I want to go to this specific university, University of Indiana, because they had a great trainers program. And I didn't get it, so I don't know what I'm going to do right now. But if I hang around, I'm going to get drafted, So I went ahead, and when I graduated from high school, I was only 17 years old because I have a November birthday. So it would have been a little bit before I got drafted, but my father had assigned me into the service, and he said he would only sign me into the Air Force or the Navy, no Army or Marines.
I see.
So I picked the Air Force, went into the Air Force. So,
how did you choose your career field?
well, you take the, I believe it's called the ASVAB test, and then, they score you out, and then I stayed in the mechanics area. I wanted to be a jet engine mechanic because my thought was to learn jet engines, do a 4-year career, and then I would have a career, come back to Chicago, possibly work at O'Hare International Airport, whatever the case may be, and use that as a career. But you quickly find out that the military needs come first, and they made me a parachute rigger.
Right.
And I didn't even know what that was, and what it is you inspect, repair, and repack drag chutes. You used drag chutes at the time to slow the aircraft down, and then personnel chutes that the pilot wears, and then cargo chutes for aerial delivery. So I did that. The odd thing about that was the school was 16 weeks long in Rantoul, Illinois at Chanute Air Force Base. 4 of those weeks you learned how to sew, and 2 of those weeks you had learned how to do sewing machine maintenance on 5 different machines.
Is that right?
Yes, I can still sew to this day.
So you didn't have any trouble finding anybody to sew on your stripes when you...
No, I did it all myself, tailored my own uniforms, all that kind of stuff, yes, so very much so. And then, you sit at tech school, and then you get called in a big group in the base theater, and then they call your career field out, tell you what's available, where to go, and then you put down where you want to go, potentially overseas, first, second, third, stateside, first, second, third.
Right.
And then you put that down, and then the computer did all the rest. Kicked out my assignment, Tui Wai Air Base, South Vietnam, so went right away.
Computers were not as sophisticated then.
No. But at least I got it out of the way, and I went.
So you said your father was in the Army. Were any of your other family members in the military?
No, not that I know of at all. And my brothers and sisters know. My son know.
So you went straight to Vietnam after tech
Straight.
school. Tell me what that was like.
It was different. We got off the airplane in Cam Bay, and it was flares going off everywhere. You could hear the sounds of gunfire and things of that nature. And then they say, scoot, run to the, to a place that they had pointed out, stay low and all that kind of stuff. And you say, holy smokes, I'm really here. Then you get inside the terminal and you see all the local nationals or the Vietnamese and everything that they told you before you got there. Watch out for people in black pajamas and the hats and everything, and there they are all over the terminal, squatting and, sitting there and that kind of stuff. But that was my introduction. And then I had to make my way up to Tuiwa Air Base, which is about 125 miles northeast.
What kind of cultural training did you have to prepare you for going to Vietnam?
None really, just they gave you a book to read and, that kind of stuff. And then you sat through a class, if I remember, or just overall. But it was quite different, But being in the Air Force, it's, there's Air Force jobs that take you off the base and bring you outside the perimeter or whatever the case may be. We were totally on base, confined to base, and we worked 12 on, 12 off, 7 days a week, So, and if you wanted to go to breakfast before, and it was 6 to 6 to give you the 12 window. So if you wanted to eat breakfast, you went before you went to work. And then when they let you go back to the chow hall for lunch. And then if you wanted dinner, it was after you got off of work. The chow hall was open 22 hours a day, so they could accommodate.
Right. So what year was that you went to Vietnam?
1969, and I arrived in country 1st of December of 1969. I left country 1 October 1970. And depending on how many personnel we have, we could adjust the shifts too. If they were 12 hours, we could move them to 3 of 8, kind of thing. It depended on the amount of personnel.
Tell me about that job a little bit, though. That's a very important job, and you've got people's lives in your hands. So tell me about that.
Yeah. In country, I was assigned to a base that had F-100 jet fighters there, so they used a drag chute to slow down. There was about 75 aircraft assigned, and then all the transit aircraft as well. So just isolating to drag chutes, we packed on average anywhere from probably 2,300 to 3,000 a month. That's just drag chutes. Not alone the personnel chutes. Personnel chutes had to be inspected every 120 days, so you had to manage that. And if any cargo chutes were used or going to be used, you'd pack those and send them out, so. And the tempo can get kind of high in certain times, if they're flying a lot or whatever the case may be. The one thing that I failed to mention, but it's worth mentioning, that back to the chow hall and eating in 12 hours a day, where the chow hall was and where you worked was about 2-ish miles away.
Oh my!
And it was the Shoe Leather Express that got you to and from. So
I see.
That, and so when you got you put in monsoon season now, so 5 feet out the door of the chow hall, you're soaked, and then you go to work. So work, there was, it was all guys, and so you just stripped down to your undies, and we had a tall tower on base, at our parachute shop, so we could dry parachutes. So we dry our clothes in there, and because it had heaters, we used H1 heaters to make that work. So, and then that being said, those chutes come in from the ramp, they're soaking wet, they're dripping wet, so that you had to separate them and hang them and dry them and repack them and get them going, so. But at times when we had enough people, people would be doing drag shoots, personnel shoots, whatever the case may be. So,
Well, these are
pretty
questions
busy.
yeah, and these are questions that I usually ask later, but you're right there. So I have to ask, what was it like for you serving in a combat zone?
As I mentioned, the base was, we were, restricted to base, and the base in my 10-ish months there, 10 months there, we only got hit twice. I was at work one time, and in the barracks the next time. Now, I say barracks, everybody thinks of a multi-story building. These were a slab of cement, I-beams, corrugated tin, and single story, and we had, sand all around us. They built, it was about 3 feet wide, just filled it with sand, boxes, not sandbags, and then had that all around us. So you just take cover, and then you have to report. You know in advance. Do you report to get your weapon and then go to the security police and then get put out on the perimeter, or do you report to work? And so I had to report to work, and then that happened at 2 in the morning or something like that. Well, when they declare an all clear or something at 4 or 5, you don't go back. You just stay there, and your 12-hour shift starts,
Right.
So, the second time we got hit, it was 4th of July, if I'm not mistaken, and we were in the parachute shop, and everybody had left for midnight chow, and there was only 2 of us there. You couldn't completely leave the place, so there was 2 of us there, and got hit, and then you have only minutes to call in for a status report of the number of people, that kind of stuff. And so I went to check on my fellow parachute rigger, Danny, and we had just gotten, first time ever since I was stationed there, brand new drag chutes in, and we had them in a pile because we were putting them in service in the back of the parachute shop, and all I could see were combat boots from under the pile. He was taking cover,
Right.
So, yeah, it was. It's a little different,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Not like the guys in the Army and the Marines that were out there on patrol and doing that on a daily basis.
Right.
It was a little different for us.
But you were just an 18-year-old kid at this time,
Yeah,
right?
I just turned 18 when I
Yeah.
arrived in Vietnam. I had only been 18 for a month. And to change the pace a bit, I went to church every Sunday, and so I found out you could volunteer to drive the chaplain around.
Yeah.
So you got to, he had to have a security detail with him, so he had 2 people, a driver, the chaplain, and a vehicle. So I did that, so to put a little excitement in my young life, And we went to the Army base, the Korean base, and between the day of going to Mass, I went, I think, an average of 4 to 5 masses on Sunday,
Wow.
Yeah, because you're with the chaplain, and he's saying Mass and everything. And so, yeah.
How often did you do that?
Every Sunday.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were driving.
Once I found out about it,
Yes,
and I
okay.
could do that, get permission to do it,
So you were driving the chaplain around every Sunday?
Either driving, riding shotgun, whatever the
Okay.
case may be.
Wow. And how did you deal with the stress of all of that?
It wasn't that bad. We only had to drive about 5 miles to the Army base, and then for the Korean base, I think it was an additional 2-ish, and then we drove back to our base, I, at one time, a lot of these stories I don't even think my family knows, but I applied for a 1-day pass. I found out you could, the Army needed shotgun riders on their convoy, so I did that, and I took a convoy from Tuiwa all the way up to Quin Yan, and then I hitched a ride back on a helicopter. Did that on a 1-day pass, so yeah, that was quite interesting.
Yes.
Getting out on the countryside and
Imagine.
being very vulnerable, and there was one-way bridges, so if there was another convoy coming, you had to pull over, and that's when you're the most vulnerable,
Right.
Because who's ever going the fastest and closest to the bridge, they get to go over, and then once they pass through, then you can go through. So, and you're riding in a cab with a driver that's not necessarily much older than you.
Right.
And their goal is to get from point A to point B as fast as they can. So they're just floorboarding the truck, the deuce and a half, and there was sheet metal on the floor. There's sheet metal in the windows with just little slits in the windows so we could see out. There's M16 right there on full auto, just sitting right there. So I mean, it was fairly serious. So. But, adventure.
Right.
Looking back at it, it was a little crazy, but, would I do it again? I don't know. So, back then, a different story.
So you were there not quite a year.
No, 10 months, if I'm
Right.
not mistaken.
What other experiences can you relate from that time?
One that I don't like to admit to, but, the tempo with the drag chutes can get, as I mentioned, pretty high.
Yes.
That being said, that during the monsoon season, you have to, turn those, rotate them quickly. And so we packed them, and they weren't quite dry.
Yeah.
So, but they wanted them to put in the aircraft, and so you make exceptions, So I let one go, it was probably a little too wet, and it froze at altitude. So when it came out, it was just a block of ice that dropped out there. So what does that mean? Well, the pilot gets a little upset to start off with, but then he's got to drop his hook and take the barrier at the end of the runway. They don't like to do that.
Yeah.
It's like a carrier landing. And so then I'm in front of the colonel explaining why. But it's a wartime environment, and the tempo was high, and there was no chutes. You want your mission to go or not go, and they all understand it, but I just got a severe chewing out.
Right.
Don't let it happen to get well. Don't fly missions. No, just kidding, but
Right.
But that's how that kind of thing. So.
Yes.
But the reason we left at Tuiwa is we were part of the President Nixon pullout.
Oh.
And they shut our base down. And so they sent the aircraft back to England Air Force Base, Louisiana, and they needed 600 personnel to follow along. Well, the following week, I was supposed to get my follow-on assignment. And then they sent out a list. They wanted volunteers to go back, but you have 9 or more months in country to qualify to go back. So I automatically got notified because I was getting ready to hit 10 months in country, and they said I was a non-volunteer, and so the list comes out. There was 2 non-volunteers on that, myself and Danny. If you remember the shoes under the pile of drag chutes, Danny and I didn't want to go to Louisiana, and so we ended up going, and I never found out where I wanted to go. To where I was going to go, and I wanted to go to El Centro Navy Base, and it was a parachute job, and you would be put on jump status, and then you would test all the new parachutes and things of that nature. So it would have been a fun, adventurous job. So, but I went to Louisiana.
And what did that job entail in Louisiana?
Okay, same thing. Inspect, repair parachutes. To jump back to Vietnam real quickly, to throw in some sewing for you. We had a lot of pilots come in that they wore survival vests. So they had their survival vest on, their harness, and their G suit and things of that nature. They would come in with bullets and additional 38 caliber handguns and everything else, and want you to sew that on their equipment. So the struggle is to find places to put their ammunition and everything else. So we made pockets and sewed it into their survival vests and things of that nature. And with no supplies coming in on an extremely regular basis, when those parachutes get ejected at the end of the runway, when they make their turn and eject a drag chute, it drags across the runway, or the ramp, and so it rips and everything else. So we were constantly sewing to repair the drag chutes, do things for the pilots and that kind of stuff. So
Wow.
In Vietnam like that, everybody's a Radar O'Reilly from MASH.
Right.
It's all what can you do for me? I'll help you. You help me kind of thing. So, that's how we got our barbecue grill was a 55-gallon drum, those kind of things.
Right.
So, yeah. So, but now to Louisiana.
Yes.
So then I went to Louisiana,
Okay.
did the same thing, inspect, repair, repack parachutes.
How long were you there?
2 years and 2 months or so, and that's where I met and married my wife.
Okay.
But during that time, the one thing that you don't want to happen happened, but you feel good that it all worked out well, is that I had a pilot eject out of his F-100 not too far the range in Louisiana, which was, I think, very close to Fort Polk. And he had a flame out at about 4,800 feet and had a leak. It's too low of altitude for the F-100, and he did whatever he could do, but still not enough time. So he left the airplane, and then he parachuted to safety. So that's a big thing.
Yeah, and that was your parachute.
That was
one
my
you packed.
parachute. Yeah. There's a book in the back of the parachute pack that has your name on it, plus life support records that too, and so it's on other paperwork in a building on base, so it's in more than one area, so they can always find out who did it. And in the parachute, a lot of people don't know is that there's 10 minutes of oxygen in there. There's a survival knife. There's also a minimum survival kit, really minimum survival kit, but there's also a radio in there. It's a radio beacon. And when you have a parachute on and you see it on the back of the pilot, but when it opens up, you see the canopy open up, the lines come down, there, and then there's risers there, the thicker straps. Well, in that strap, there's an antenna to the beacon. So when the riser comes up, it pops the button on the beacon, which turns it on. Why that's important, now they can follow the pilot on radar.
Right.
And they know where he's at. They can navigate rescue to him. And well, my radio didn't work. So, and your seat in the aircraft is also, you're sitting on a survival seat, their main survival equipment. And so until he landed, they didn't know where he was at. And so in the survival seat, there's a radio, a handheld radio, so he called him in. And so he was rescued by helicopter. The base had a rescue helicopter there. But he traded his parachute to the farmer for a ride, because the farmer saw it all happen, for a ride to the clearing so he could get picked up by the helicopter. But my plug didn't pop out. So I was part of the, I was involved in the accident investigation board, and I had to be there and answer, and as it turned out, is everything was done correctly. It's just that the cord stretched, and then after that we had to have a 1-inch loop in there. After that, they had you would call a time compliance TCTO, and technical order, and so there was no loop in it anymore, so it ensured that it'd pop out right away. So
there's a tradition
correct.
wrapped up
Yes,
in that. So tell me about that.
Yeah, once, if you get a personnel parachute used like that, nobody wants that because of the loss of the aircraft and everything else like that. But traditionally, a pilot will come back to the egress shop, which is the shop that manages the ejection seat, and services the ejection seat and arms the rockets that are in the seat that propel the pilot out of the airplane. And then he'll also come to the parachute shop. And the tradition is to give a fifth of whiskey to the individual, that the last person to service the seat, and the parachute rigger that packed the chute. So at the parachute shop, I can't speak on behalf of the egress shop, but parachute shop, we use long parachute packing tables. And so the whole shop falls out along a table, and you're at the head of the line along with the shop chief. The pilot comes in, thanks you, and then he opens up the bottle, a fifth of whiskey, he takes a drink, you take a drink, and then you share it with the rest of the office. So they usually come in close to the end of the day when they do that. But yeah, that was a nice, thank you kind of thing.
And something you could be proud of.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Right. So and you were at England for 2.5, England Air Force Base?
Yeah, 2 years and a couple of months, and then my enlistment was up, and so at that point, I was married, and we had a weeks old daughter, and I get an assignment and it says Mildenhall Air Base in England. And I said, whoa, well, I'm at the end of my career, and if we take this assignment, which was a 4-year controlled tour.
Oh, wow.
So I have to re-enlist to do it, and then I come back to the United States, and I'm then not separated from the service. So I didn't necessarily want to do that with a wife and a child and possibly a second child and be dropped off at McGuire Air Force Base, New Jersey, and said, "See ya, it's been a nice time." So my wife and I sat down and had a long talk and I said, if we take this, which we would go to Europe and we get to see Europe, and maybe we'll never get to do it, but this is a great opportunity. But if we do this, then we should go for 20. And she said yes. And so we did it, and I went for 23.
Yeah,
so
that's a big decision, though.
It is.
And
yes.
How did you meet your wife? You said you met her at the England Air Force Base. How did you meet her?
Well, the town was 30,000. It was a real small town. And of course, the military base occupied a lot of it. And there was a main drag called MacArthur Drive, which I was just on a couple of days ago. And there was a drive-in called Hoppers, which today is like Sonic.
Okay.
And then on one side of the street, and then across the street was McDonald's, and on Friday and Saturday night, everybody would just jump in the car, and you'd kind of make the rounds. You go to Sonic, and then over to McDonald's, and then we parked every couple of spots. So if a car full of girls pulled up next to you, then you join your buddy if his car was closer versus your car. That kind of stuff. So that's how I met my wife. She probably won't appreciate this now.
It's a good story. How old was she?
We're both the same age.
Okay.
She's actually 10 days older than I am.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
And so you were, what, by this time you were 19?
I got married at 20 and had my first child at 21.
Wow. It's a lot of responsibility.
For
for
and then go to England for 4 years with a wife that's, never really been out of A, Louisiana, and B, the United States of America. So
what was that experience like for you?
Well, I had to go by myself.
Okay.
And until I could find a place. And then once you found a place to live, then the base had to verify that, and then they would notify, England Air Force Base that yes, they can come. They cut her a set of orders, and then she then travels there. So, and that's how she joined me. I went in January, and she joined me in May or June.
Were there any challenges for her in making that?
The move? No, I was a very good husband. I made notes of the whole trip that I did, and then when I got in my room at the barracks, I recorded a cassette tape.
See.
And then I mailed it back to her. And then she listened to it a couple of times. So then when she got there, when she made the trek of going, to Chicago to see my family, and then, over to Philly to catch the plane and everything else, and she had it all down pat, And actually was leading other people around, because she knew. She hadn't been there, but she knew because I told her. So,
right. How was your time at Mildenhall?
Yeah, my time at Mildenhall was great. It had a variety of things that happened. We had President Ford that came through, and then we also, the SR-71 came, and when it did its record flight either from LA to London or Washington to London, whatever that, at that time frame, came through, and then it parked right there by our aircraft hangar. I was not in personnel chutes or drag chutes at that time. I was in a cargo environment. There was a base parachute shop, but I was assigned to the aerial port squadron. And we did all the chute packing for aerial delivery of jeeps, trucks, whatever the case may be, food supply, ammunition, whatever. And we were always packing and repacking those because there was a drop zone about 15 miles or so from our hangar.
What is the difference in packing a chute for a person versus packing a chute for cargo?
The principles are the same.
Okay.
You know, you have your four main reference lines and you follow those down with your fingers, and you can clear all the twists and tangles. The difference is a personnel parachute was 28 feet in diameter, and the biggest cargo chute we packed was 100 feet in diameter.
Wow.
So we did it on the hangar floor. The floor, half the hangar, if you can imagine an aircraft hangar, converted into the floor of tile with a post coming out, cemented into the ground, and we used a tug to put tension on the chute to do all that. And then the other half of the hangar was used for all the training pallets and jeeps and things of that nature. And then the loadmasters would rig them up. You know, we provide them the chutes. The equipment come back in, whatever, and then they would re-rig the loads and take our chutes and put them up there and do that.
What other experiences did you have at Mildenhall that would stand out to you?
To me, probably the LAPES parachute system, low altitude parachute extraction system. I learned that over there, and the aircraft, a C-130 in this case, when you load pallets, if you will, in an aircraft, there's a rail system. And on the sliding pallet that fits in the aircraft, that's where you'd put the Jeep or whatever. It would get loaded on there, and then the aircraft would come in at 500 feet, take a quick nosedive, and go to 6 to 12 feet above the ground. And then an extraction chute would come out, which would be a 15-foot diameter parachute, and then it would pull the chutes off the equipment, and then they would inflate, in this case 2 or 3 chutes that are probably, if I remember correctly, 28 to 30 something feet in diameter. And then the loadmaster inside releases the locks on the side that hold the pallet, and then the chutes pull it out of the airplane.
Right.
And that was lessons learned of delivery of munitions and medical supplies, equipment, that kind of stuff from Vietnam. You know, to get stuff in right to the troops, you know, not land the airplane, jeopardize the airplane, offload it, all that. They just come in very quickly, dive, level, let it go, and go climb back up and get out of the area. You know, so that was pretty exciting.
And were you able to see Europe while you were there?
Oh, sure. The unit I was in, we did a lot of traveling. Since we were an aerial port squadron, we were the airport facility, if you will, at major military exercises. So if we did an exercise, and one of the first ones I went on was in Greece. We went to Thessaloniki, Greece, and we would be at the commercial airport, but at the offside, you know, where there's no activity. And then the military airplanes would come in and we'd offload them, you know, and then they would turn around and leave or offload the troops, and then we'd set them up for if there was airdrops for it, and we'd do all that. So I got to travel a great deal, always on the road. We got our chutes repaired. Repairs that we couldn't accomplish, we would take them to an Army depot in Germany. So then we would take a truck from our unit, put it on an airplane, take the chutes, go over there, drive off the airplane, go to the depot, deliver the chutes, and then pick up ones that were repaired from the last visit and come back. And but while I was there, I took the family. We flew Space A to Germany, and then we, you know, rented a car and went all over the place. While we were living in England, we took a trip to Wales. We went up to Scotland and, you know, skied and that kind of stuff. You know, so there's a great opportunity. Another time, there was some 8th Air Force reunion going on over there, and the actor Jimmy Stewart came.
Wow.
And I got to photograph him at the Cambridge National Military Cemetery, where he came to pay his respects to his fellow airmen that he served with while he was in Europe.
When did you cross-train to become a photographer?
On my way back from England, I got an assignment. I applied for cross training with a direct duty assignment, meaning no tech school,
Right.
because based on my knowledge and experience of photography, for an on-the-job training environment. And so I applied for that. It got approved, and then I went to Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, which is Omaha, Nebraska, at Strategic Air Command Headquarters Base, and then I was assigned to the base photo lab for 2 years and 2 months.
Where did you gain that experience as a photographer?
From high school on, I had a big interest in photography. I used to sneak out my grandfather's camera and take pictures and that kind of stuff, and then just maintained it. And in England at Mildenhall, we had hobby shops, and I got to work at the photo hobby shop. And so I did a lot of work there. And so I said, I'm staying in. I don't necessarily want to do parachutes all the time. So I said, let's grab this and see what we can do. So I applied and got it. And then I went to Offutt, and it was great. It was great doing things there. I worked at the headquarters, a lot where you photograph all the VIPs and things of that nature. I got to photograph the Queen of Denmark, Jimmy Carter, President Carter at the time, all kinds of dignitaries. The communications officer from Star Trek came through with a couple other actors, because at Strategic Air Command they had the underground headquarters, and we always photographed VIPs down there, by the red phone and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So you have, what was her name, O'Hara or whatever?
Yeah.
We had her, and she's
Nicole, I can't remember her last name.
But she was there, and of course they put her on the phone, that kind of stuff, the glitzy stuff, and so that happened.
Now, were you doing portraits, or were you doing candid, or both?
As a base level photographer, you did portraits in the studios. You did the passport photos. The officers needed promotion folders for portraits for their promotion folders, and that kind of thing. And it could be almost anything. We could photograph stuff for the hospital, stuff for presentations and everything, where you set up sets in the studio and photograph it. You did the car accidents, you did the autopsies, you did all that kind of stuff,
How were you received with others in the same career field?
With
when
all the
you
experienced
arrived?
people,
Yes,
and me, the
yes.
newbie on the block.
Right.
Pretty fair, I had a lot to learn, in reference to the Air Force way of doing photography. And, it was on the job training, and it turned out real well. And so, I checked around, and I found out there's a tech school you could go to on photojournalism.
Okay.
And it was at the photo school at Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, Colorado. And so I applied for that and got it. It was a 6-week school. And so I took my car and drove to Lowry Air Force Base from Omaha, Nebraska, and went to school there. And you had all the assignments, and a lot of the people that came didn't have transportation. And so all the assignments were geared to be done on base. And so I didn't want that. So since I had transportation, I did all my assignments off base.
I see.
And so one of the assignments I did, I drove down to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And I did one of the assignments there, and I was there for noontime, and they were marching to lunch and everything else. And I said, what does it take to be assigned here, And when I came back, I said, I think I found our next place where I'd like to go. And so I found out what you needed to do. It was a special duty assignment, and I filled all the squares and submitted it and got selected. And I went to the Air Force Academy, and I was stationed there for 3.5 years. During that time, boy, you photograph a lot of VIPs, that come there. Everybody wanted to come there. One of the best ones was Bob Hope. He came there, and he came more than once. and he liked the golf course, and he played golf, and of course you have to photograph him with the commandant, you know, the 3-star general that runs the place, the superintendent.
Yes.
And he asked the superintendent, he says, you know, that time he did his birthday shows, his yearly birthday shows. And he said, I'd like to do my birthday show here. And the general says, well, I'm sure we can make that happen. But, you know, he has to get that approved, obviously. And next thing you know, we're doing Bob Hope's birthday show. And he's back again, you know. And to do his 90-minute birthday show on TV, or an hour, whatever it was at the time, they started shooting all day Thursday, all day Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then they put all that together.
Wow.
We had, what was it, Andy Gibb was there. Alan Shepard was there, the astronaut. I'm trying to think of the actress's name that was on WKRP in Cincinnati. Lonnie Anderson.
Yes.
Yeah. We had Randy and Ty there from the Olympic team. You know, so there was a lot going on, and so it was a good time, you know.
How long were you at Offutt?
About 2 years and 2 months, 2
And
years
then
and 3. And then I went to the
3
Air Force.
years.
3.5 years there.
Okay. So now you're what, about 12 years into your...
4, 8, yeah, 12, 13 years. Well, a little more, somewhere right around there.
And what's your rank at this time?
Yikes. Probably staff sergeant. And then I made tech, I think, there. But I made it there. I put on my 5th stripe there.
Okay.
Because every year for graduation, the Thunderbirds came into town, and they always flew on graduation day, and they timed their pass with the hat toss.
Oh, wow.
And that's when they say, congratulations, you know, new second lieutenants, and they throw their hat up, and say class dismissed, and they throw their hats up in the air. So the Thunderbirds time that, you know, to do that. So they're there a couple of days early, and they're involved in certain things that are going on in the academy, and they're at the superintendent's house, and you photograph all that. And so you get to see them, and I said, what do you need to do to get on the Thunderbirds, you know, kind of thing. And so I check around, and I ask their, you know, call out there and talk to them. And so then I applied to go and got selected to go. And so then I left the Air Force Academy, which was a 4-year controlled tour. I left 6 months early and went to the Thunderbirds.
How long did you do that?
I was on the Thunderbirds about 2.5 years.
What was that experience like for you?
Well, when I first got on board, it was terrible. And the only reason I say that is because when they were packing my household goods up to go to Las Vegas, Nevada at Nellis Air Force Base, the Diamond crashed out at Indian Springs. And all 4 pilots were lost. All 4 pilots, 4 aircraft were lost. So I called to see if I still had a job. And so they said, yes, come on out. And so went out there, and then I'm involved in part searches and things of that nature. And then you go through a period where the team looks at you over a 30-day window, and you look at them, and they see if it's a fit. And the reason I say that, if you're not ready to work 25 hours in a day, 8 days a week, then the team's not right for you.
Is
you know,
that
kind
right?
of thing. And they may not, you know, it's a PR thing. Everywhere you go, you're in front of a crowd. It's a demonstration, and it involves a certain amount of showmanship to it. You know, you have a launch program, you have a recovery part of the show, and then the pilots fly the show. So you're in front of a crowd, and they want somebody that's got a good Air Force knowledge, good background, maturity in the Air Force, and can interact with the public well, you know, and do that. So that was very, very important. And in essence, you worked kind of for the recruiting service, you know, because that was the goal. One of the goals is to demonstrate air power to the public, but also recruit in the background, you know.
Go back to the Diamond for a minute.
Sure.
Explain what the Diamond is.
The Diamond, on the team there are 6 demonstration pilots. So there's 6 aircraft in the show, and there's 4, 4 takeoff, then a 1-1 kind of on the takeoff, and then the diamond is a 4-ship formation. So they'll come around and do something, and then wherever they exit, a solo will come in, and they'll come the opposite way, and then wherever they exit, then the other solo comes in and comes across the parade, the show line. And so that goes on, and then at different times, the 2 solos will get together and do some maneuvers, and then the solos will join the diamond, and then they'll do delta ship maneuvers, and then they'll all pitch up to land and come on down.
So did they determine what caused the accident?
It was a problem with the horizontal stabilizer. There was an actuator back there. So if you can imagine, the easiest way to probably say it, drive down the interstate highway at 70 miles an hour, and you have 4 cars out there, one on your left, one on your right, and one behind you. And the only one that's watching the instrumentation and what's going on is the commander leader. The right, the left, the rear are all looking at marks on the commander leader's airplane, trying to stay in line with him in formation at anywhere from 18 to 36 inches apart. So they're flying off the boss.
Right.
And if the boss has a problem, they wouldn't know about it because they're not looking at their instruments and things of that nature. So he had a problem with the airplane, and then they were in a loop. They were doing a diamond loop.
I see. What aircraft were they flying then?
T-38.
That's what I thought.
Good question.
So they were in the process of performing a loop?
Yes, in practice. It was out of the practice field, correct. And then the crash happened.
Yeah. And you were just coming in when this was...
Right.
Wow.
Bad time to come into the team.
Yes.
But, the commander of the Tactical Air Command was General Creech. He was an ex-Thunderbird pilot. And one of the 4, major commanders in the Air Force. And he fought and saved the team.
Wow.
And also got the team the F-16 that they still fly to this day. So I was on for, a few months with the T-38s, and then we transitioned into the F-16. So from the date of the accident to the first air show was almost 18 months.
Wow.
Because we had to get the airplanes in. We had to have pilots qualified to fly them, so they had to go through a reselection process, and then start the training season with all the jets and the pilots. And so then we did our first air show.
So how long were you with the Thunderbirds?
2.5 years.
And you mentioned that they selected you and you selected them.
Well, that's during the observation period.
Right.
Yeah, you had to turn in a portfolio of your work and your records, and then they evaluate all that and say yes. And then when you get there, you're reevaluated. And then it's you evaluate them, in real life, versus, all paperwork and doing all this over the phone and message traffic and things of that nature.
Did you have to submit a portfolio every step along the way as you're progressing up to that position?
Pretty much, submitted a portfolio, if I remember correctly, the Air Force Academy to the Thunderbirds. And then, we did that. And then at the time, that was a 2-year controlled tour on the Thunderbirds. Now it's not, then it was. So you had to reapply to do your 3rd year. And so then I had to reapply, not as extensive, obviously, because you're a current member of the team. It's the team that meets and says, the officers meet and say, do we want to keep them for another year, kind of thing. And one of the key people in that decision-making process was the logistics officer, because he was the photo chase pilot. So you had to have a good rapport with the photo chase pilot as well. So, and then they make the decision, and then you're either on or gone, kind of thing. So,
did you make that decision to leave the team, or did they make that decision for you?
Another opportunity arose. I applied for officer training school in my career 4 different times, never got it. The last time I applied was coming off the Thunderbirds, which I thought would be my best opportunity with that endorsement. and I didn't get it. And so different opportunities surfaced because I met a photojournalist when I was stationed at Mildenhall, and we were deployed to Sardinia, off the coast of Italy. And that really fascinated me, and I always remembered it to this day. And so I researched what you need to do that,
Right.
And so I researched that and put in a package, which once again is your military records, a portfolio of your work, that kind of thing. And to hedge my bets, when I put in for that, that was a Department of Defense program. So it was a Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard environment. And the Air Force picked 6 photographers a year to go. And then they send you to Syracuse University for a year. And so how can you beat that?
Right.
Going on campus, going to school. But you stayed together as an all-military class.
Had you gone to college by
Yes,
this time? Okay.
Yeah, I had 2 associate degrees. I had a bachelor's degree, and I was studying for my master's degree.
Oh my goodness, really?
Yeah, and of course I couldn't finish my master's because I was on Thunderbirds.
Right.
And then, so I applied to become a photojournalist. And so to hedge my bet, I also applied for an Air Force Audiovisual Service operating location chief, where you would then run the photo lab, the graphics shop, the film library. And so I put in for that as well. And I said, well, let's see what happens. So they both came back approved,
wow.
selected.
Right.
So then I had to make a decision, and so I picked photojournalism. And so then I went to Syracuse University for a year.
And what drove that decision for you?
The biggest thing probably was the excitement of the travel, additional travel, as well as that you got put on flying status.
Oh.
And you did all the aerial photography. So, yeah, looking back, I've flown in 20 or 22 military aircraft.
Is that right?
Yeah, and favorite airplane to fly in was the F-16.
Yeah.
So you can't complain. So that was stacked
Right.
up against sitting behind a desk managing 3. Nothing wrong with that,
Right.
But I selected photojournalism. And
Or packing parachutes. That was
Yeah,
go all the way back to
I
that.
could have always fell back to that, but. So then I, parachute rigger, photographer, now photojournalist.
Right.
And so they picked some, when you got selected to go, they picked the highest ranking person and brought them back to Norton Air Force Base for 3 days to kind of read you the riot act of what goes on at school, and how to manage, because you need to still maintain a certain level of military bearing, dress and appearance. You are representing the Air Force. And so I went back there, and what never happens is you never know where you're going to go, after school.
Right.
They would ask you in the fall, and you would find out in January, because school's out in May, so you have to be able to go somewhere. So I was there I was the highest ranking guy, so I was the class leader, so I'm getting read the riot act, and I'm in the commander's office, and the colonel says to me, "How do you feel about Germany?" I said, "Pardon me?" And he says, "Well, we think you'd be great in Germany." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I said, "Any specific reason?" He said, and the colonel says, "Why? Where do you want to go?" I said, "I want to come right back here." Air Force Audiovisual Service headquarters level. The vast majority of photojournalists were assigned there.
Oh, I see.
And so we really like you to go to Germany. So I said, "Okay. Can I talk to my wife about this?" And they go, "Sure. Let me know first thing in the morning." And my wife, since we were living in Las Vegas, it was a quick 5-hour drive over to Norton Air Force Base. It's about an hour, which is an hour south of LA. And so while I was doing all my military stuff, the wife and kids, they went to Disneyland.
Oh.
And so when they come back, we went out to dinner, and I said, "Well, what do you think about this?" And my wife goes, "I don't know." See, our daughter was was going into high school, and don't want to go over there and yank her out in the middle of high school, those kind of considerations. And I said, "Well, it's another opportunity that we might not get."
Right.
And so she said yes. And as it turns out, it seems to be one of the best decisions that we made, because the kids to this day loved the assignment, wish they were going back, and they had such great experiences there, and the school wasn't really a factor whatsoever. So I went off to, after Syracuse University, then I went off to survival school in Fairchild Air Force Base in Washington State, and then after that to the altitude chamber, and then back to Syracuse University to go take the family over to Germany. And then we left and went to Germany for 3 years.
What were those experiences like?
Well, funny that you asked that. When you arrive in Germany, you arrive first thing in the morning. And so the goal is to stay up as long as you can to kind of get on the time with the time change. And so I met my sponsor, who I corresponded with, the latter half of my semester at Syracuse, the second semester at Syracuse. And he met me at the airplane, took me around. With my rank, I could bring my family, so my wife and children came, and we stayed at the base hotel. And so we stayed up as long as we could, and it was about 8 o'clock, so we all go to bed. And next thing you know, at about 9 o'clock or something like that, 9:15, there's pounding at my door. I'm saying, what the hell? And so I just kind of ignored it, and the pounding continued. And so I got up to answer the door. I said, who's there? He said, open the door. I said, who's there? He said, this is your first sergeant and your executive officer. We need to talk to you right now. Absolutely. Open the door, standing there in my shorts, and said, how can I help you, gentlemen? And the first sergeant goes, we need you to come to work. I said, I don't even know where I work.
Right.
He says, well, you've got a photo assignment to do. I said, I don't have any equipment. We'll take care of that. We'll get dressed, and we're going to take you to work. So they sat there and waited for me to get dressed and go to work. And so my wife asked what's going on. I said, I got to go to work. And she said, okay. And so off to work I go. And that was when the TWA hostages were coming back through that were in the Middle East.
Yes.
And if you can remember the pilot and everything, and I think they killed a serviceman on board the airplane and everything. Well, all those American hostages were coming back through. And at that time, everybody were all coming back through Rhein-Main Air Base in Frankfurt, Germany. And Rhein-Main Air Base is Frankfurt International Airport. One side of the base is the international airport, the other side of the base was military. And so he says, the executive officer says, well, you got 2 other photojournalists here. How are you going to manage them? I mean, I haven't even seen them except for one that was my, sponsor.
Right.
And but I did know the other guy because he and I worked together at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs.
Wow, okay.
So it's not that I didn't know him, but so I said, okay, Dave can go out to Wiesbaden Medical Center, because they always took him to Wiesbaden Army Medical Center, and I'll put Fernando in the press pool, and I'll stake out they were putting a pool of photographers on the roof of base operations. So I got my equipment and got up on the roof of base ops by 11:30 at night, somewhere around there. And then at 7 o'clock in the morning, the vice president came in, President Bush at the time. And then at about 8 o'clock or so, then the hostages were flown in. So I was up on the roof all night. Wow. You got to hold a tripod position, because if you want a certain position, you got to stand and hold your ground.
Right. Right.
Otherwise, somebody's going to take it, for a better advantage,
sure.
closer, whatever the case may be.
Right.
So it's so I was up there, and then you photograph the vice president coming in from that vantage point. You photograph him greeting all the hostages that were returned, all the Americans. So that was my introduction to my assignment.
Now, compared to the Air Force Academy and compared to the Thunderbirds, what was that experience like?
As a photojournalist?
Yes, they're all heady, heady kind of
experiences. As a photojournalist and being assigned at Rhein-Main Air Base, I was one of 3 photojournalists, and Out of the three, I was the highest ranking, so they worked for me. But our news beat was all of Europe, Northern Africa, and the Middle East.
Wow.
And so I was constantly on the road. When you travel, it's sometimes nice to go with, there would be an assignment with 2 photojournalists or 3 photojournalists. And my 3 years there, I was paid the ultimate compliment by the other 2 because they were there a year ahead of me, so they were leaving at my 2-year time frame, and I was going to break in 2 new photojournalists. Well, they both volunteered for a 4th year and stayed. We had such a rapport. We clicked so well, and the personalities really, really worked. And so having said that, when you look at that, how many times did I travel with each one? 2 or 3 with each one, and 1 time with the 3 of us together.
Is that right?
We were totally on our own all the time.
You had some other interesting experiences in that assignment, or interesting assignments.
Oh, within that, yes. At that point, I was assigned at Rhein-Main Air Base June of '85 to June of '88, to kind of put it in perspective for you. So during those 3 years of the '80s, a lot of things were going on. Father Jenko was taken hostage. Not Father Jenko. Father Jenko. The AP guy, I can't think of his, Jacobson, Mr. Jacobson. They were taken hostage. They were both returned. Obviously, they came through Rhein-Main Air Base. I photographed them both. Both of those times I was on the flight line with Terry Waite, who was the British envoy that secured the release of these 2 gentlemen. And one time we had another hostage return, and Terry wasn't there because he was a hostage now.
Right.
So also we had the Achille Lauro hostages come through. And if you remember, that was a cruise ship in the Mediterranean. It was an Italian cruise ship. They isolated the American on the ship, and they took Mr. Klinghoffer, killed him. He was in a wheelchair, and threw him overboard. So his wife and the other Americans were released eventually. They came back through. Then an opportunity arose because the press sees everything when you're, that public environment. You think of the press pool out there, you just can't walk on the airplane with your 2 cameras and say, okay, I'm getting on the airplane and go with Mrs. Klinghoffer back to the United States. Yeah, I could, but as soon as the press sees that, they want to go too, and then everybody wants to go along for the ride. Well, they had to sneak me on the airplane, so we, did a little deal where we had the maintenance service vehicle come by, and I snuck into it, and then they went out and serviced the airplane, but on the opposite side of the press pool, and you just sneak in and go. And so then I flew all the way back to McGuire Air Force Base with Mrs. Klinghoffer and all the hostages back there, and then turn around and then hitchhike back to Germany.
Talk a little bit more about that experience. Did you realize the historical significance at that time that you were a part of history at that time?
No. The biggest thing that I obviously focused on was, as a photojournalist, you got to tell a story, and a story has to have a beginning, it has to have a middle, it has to have an end. You have to have close-ups and portraits and all this combination. So I'm very consumed with that, as well as these are the film days. Yes. So you record it on film, and you're pushing the film and doing all kinds of things to get the good exposure and those that kind of environment. So yeah, you think about it for a little while, but then you kind of block it out. Yes, I did get to talk to her. Yes, I talked to the other hostages. We flew back with a full medical team on board. We had a doctor, we had nurses, we had medics on board, so to meet any, personal needs, because the vast majority of those hostages were all senior citizens. Yeah. So the fun time of the airplane, not that there is a fun time, the flight crew invited them up one by one up to the cockpit, and so you got to photograph them up there in the cockpit. And we flew back on a cargo transport C-141 Starlifter airplane. So just to kind of paint that picture for you, and then to fly back to the States.
So it was a 3-year assignment for you.
Yeah.
What happened after your 3 years were up?
Well, I asked to be reassigned to Norton Air Force Base in California, which is Air Force Audiovisual Service headquarters. So I got to go back there. That was granted at this time, not the last time I asked for it, but this time. So I went back to Norton Air Force Base, where I had probably, 10 or so photojournalists assigned under me. And I worked for the chief of photojournalism for the Air Force. And we literally sent people all over the world, literally, sent 2 people off to China on an assignment, another guy to go with penguins, get penguins, pick up penguins in Antarctica and then deliver them somewhere, and
I vaguely remember that.
kind of thing. So there was all kinds of things going on, the Bob Hope Christmas tours. We did that, I think, 2 different times. I didn't get to go. The chief of photojournalism went, Mr. Hackman. Those were always his assignments, to go. But, it was never a dull moment, and I left on an assignment. I was ordered on an assignment that I turned down because there was nobody in the office. Nobody. I was the only photojournalist there, chief of photojournalism gone. All the others were all gone on assignment. And I was told to do an assignment, and I passed it on to another base that had photojournalists. They couldn't do it. Then passed it on to another, and they couldn't do it. And so then I was ordered to do it. So I left the house to go shoot this assignment in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and it was 3 days. I left on 1 August and came back 22 December. And then I was home for 4 days, and then I was gone again until June. And that's when the start of Desert Shield and Desert Storm was.
I see.
So I had to go from there and then go to the Pentagon and worked at the Pentagon to where they just opened up what they called a Joint Combat Camera Reception Center. And that was a collection point of all the still photography, videotape, whatever means of visuals that they could get their hands on to brief at the Pentagon and at the White House. And that's when we started using still video at the time. And we had these transmitters, and then we had to get satellites because you would have to take the image and then put it in a player, and then 2-3 suitcase environment to set up a satellite. So I had to go to New York to pick up certain equipment from Kodak that the government bought. Then I had to go somewhere else in Virginia to learn how to use the satellite, and I picked up 5 of those, and then went over to Saudi Arabia to deliver them to 5 different locations and to teach people how to use that equipment. And so I did that and then came back, and I was, and nobody ever asked me the job I turned down, and so the job I turned down, which I had to shoot, was to photograph Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of England. Really? And she was getting briefed on President Reagan's Star Wars program in Colorado Springs, Colorado.
I see. Why did you turn it down?
Because there was a rule in the shop with the chief of photojournalism that somebody had to be there, and the shop was totally unattended.
I see.
So everybody's gone. So everybody looked to the headquarters / the squadron that was there for the decisions, because we only had photojournalists at 3 bases in the United States, and then 1 in Europe, maybe 2 in Asia. So, I mean, I was one of 40 in the whole service, in the Air Force. So, we were spread kind of thin. We did all the aerial photography, all the real world events, and we did for other services too. If there was a request for certain things, we filled those as well. So we had a pretty jam-packed environment.
How did your wife deal with that 3-day trip?
Well, when I came back the second time, we lived on base, and I came in and I looked down the hallway, and the bags were packed. And so there's only one of two things happening here. She's leaving for good, or she's going home to visit Mom. So I said, hey, what's going on? And she says, I'm going home to visit Mom. You need to take me to the airport right now. The one I just returned from, came in, on. So I drove back there, dropped her off, and she says, don't call me, don't talk to me. All I want when you pick me up next Saturday is an answer to a question. Are you going to make a career decision or a family decision? Because at that point in time, I was in the Air Force 23 years. And out of that, we were married 20 of those years. So, and she'd been very patient with me, my career, my assignments, all my travel. So she left. Our daughter was in college. Our son was in high school, so I was home, with, by myself, except for my son when he came back, but from school. But so I said, okay, I'm going to get out.
And by this time, you were a senior master sergeant? Senior
master sergeant, yes. Yeah.
And was that a hard decision for you?
For me, yes. From the standpoint of, all the glitz, the glamour of jumping in a F-16 on this base or an F-15 over here and doing aerial photography or being involved in, the like hostage returns or whatever the case may be, photographing Bob Hope, whatever the demand was, it was a whole different environment. But so that was tough in that aspect. But, when I went back to Saudi the second time, in those 4 days, we were graduating from, still video and doing it in infancy, and we created an electronic imaging center. And so I had to learn how to do the electronic imaging center, and we bought a Canon color copier, the ones that at that time were so expensive. And so we had the video portion, video office, come in and videotape the copier as we brought in a tech rep that unpacked a brand new copier, broke it down, and totally set it up, and we put it on videotape. And then as soon as he set it up, he said, okay, I'm done. No, you're not. You got to put it back together for shipment. So we packed it all back up and recorded that. Wow. And then I took that plus a variety of equipment and flew from California hitchhiking all the way to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, with a pallet of about 4,000 pounds of equipment and the color copier. And so when we got there, then we used the videotapes to set it up. And then I left the other set of videotapes behind. So when it came time to pack it up, they knew how to do it. Right. So, yeah. So but it wasn't my thought, it was somebody else's. But, so we did that and went over there. And so I was there. During my whole time, the 2 different trips to Saudi, I went to, I think, 5 different countries, about 15 different locations, because I did photojournalism work too while I was there. And I tried to stay, actually. Of course, my wife didn't want to hear that, but I asked to stay, and the commander said no, I couldn't. And the commander of the Air Force Audiovisual Service just happened to be in Saudi Arabia, and he said, no, you're coming home with me. So we went back together. So, but we set that color copier up just literally around the corner from General Schwarzkopf's war room.
Is that right?
Correct. Wow. Used to see him, or all with him on the elevators,
So you were from Vietnam all the way through Desert Storm.
Correct.
You saw a lot.
Well, I missed one in there.
Go ahead.
You ready for this one? Remember Manuel Noriega in Panama?
Yes.
Well, I went on that. We picked up, we had photojournalists assigned to different areas, and myself and a videotape camera person and, well, two videotape people and an officer in charge. We took a whole bunch of equipment and we jumped on a 141 Starlifter cargo airplane with a bunch of Army and Army Rangers, and configured in a troop configuration to where you're sitting with your knees in between each other's knees. And we flew from California all the way to Panama and went down there. And then when you're 30 minutes on final, it's when they started passing out the ammunition, the grenades, and it's all going up and down the aisles and everything else like this. And that's when you say, this is really serious business. And then when you landed there, they did what is called, in essence, a combat offload. So the airplane lands on the runway, turns onto a taxiway, then turns down the long taxiway. They open up the clamshell doors. They drop the ramp. Don't drag it. They drop it, and you run out the back, and you go, who's ever on the right side of the ramp goes right, who's ever on the left goes left. And then we dumped out our equipment, and then then the airplane taxis around to the main runway at the heading there, and that plane goes, because they don't want to risk the airplane getting blown up down there or anything else. So, yeah, so that we did that, and then we spent the night at sleeping on the ground at Omar Trios International Airport or whatever it was. Yeah, and we were out there with the Army, and then the Army brought us to Howard Air Base in Panama there, and that was the Air Force Base. And that's where we set up our main audiovisual center, and then had a satellite transmitter. We photographed, we went out with whoever in the Army, it didn't matter, We just started documenting everything, and then we'd come back, we process film, we shoot video, still video, and we transmit it back to Washington, D.C. So, I mean, it was that critical. I was the senior enlisted on the trip, and I averaged, along with the officer in charge, I had a room in a barracks that I never saw because I slept. We worked out of the base photo lab in the studio and gathering all this material, getting a project. We worked on an average of 21, 22 hours a day to get that stuff done. Yeah. And get it out there. I did manage to get out to the field with the Army a couple of times, The officer in charge, Captain Lahani, left the service and opened up his own production company. Why this is important, you're saying? Well, he got a contract with, I can't think of his name, but the gunny.
Yeah, Army.
Yes, and so they created an episode based on the Panama invasion.
Really?
Yeah, and so we did, and I was flown out to LA to do that, and taped, for that. And then one thing that we also did out there in Panama, we did the Noriega Watch. They had an airplane parked at the end of the runway, and there was a tent set up, and that's where the air crew sat, and we had one video camera man or woman and a photojournalist sitting there. So if they nabbed Noriega, the helicopter would pick them up, fly them right there, they'd put them on the airplane, and they'd fly them back to the U.S. And you, as a photojournalist and as the video camera person, you got on that airplane. You walked on, and then, you wouldn't see your bags or anything else, because they're all back in Panama, but you had to record everything. It was important to do that. So I did one or two of those kind of thing. And then the second Christmas I ever missed in my military career, I was in Panama. And I ended up, if you remember, there they were doing the psychological warfare with all the music and everything else like that. Well, they had a couple of lines of perimeter there, if you will. The Delta Force was the first line. Second line was Army Rangers, and beyond that, it was the Army and stuff. So I was in the second line, and at midnight it came across, you're with people, you're sitting there waiting because the Delta Force had a signal worked out, we were told, with the priests inside or whatever, And if they got that signal, they were cleared to storm the place. So we were there to document anything that would potentially happen.
Right.
And so it was at midnight. And what happens at midnight? Merry Christmas. And so we just wished Merry Christmas. It came from the, if I remember correctly, the right onto the left, you know, Merry Christmas, you know, kind of thing.
So what year did you retire?
1992. I think it was, my retirement's effective 1 October, but I think I was done 1 August because I had terminal leave and I could get out. And another cool assignment, not to keep you, but my last big assignment that I photographed, I was the photo editor for the, I think it was Operation Provide Hope, if I'm not mistaken. I'm testing my memory here, but that's when we flew supplies. That's when Russia broke up into its own 18 countries, a lot of the countries, and we flew supplies into those countries from Desert Storm. So right? Yeah, so there was 60 missions set up, and they were all based out of Rhine Mine. So I took a whole electronic imaging center, a variety of other things, and we went from Norton Air Force Base to Frankfurt, Germany, to Rhine Mine, and I was there. There was 90 of us plus, and I was a senior ranking guy, kind of a almost temporary first sergeant, which is a nightmare. And that's another time that I had a barracks room and never saw the barracks. And ironically, it was on Wiesbaden Air Base, and I eventually got a room on Rhine Mine Air Base, because you're operating, you know, ahead a time, 6 hours ahead of the U.S.
Right.
And so you gotta be on Washington D.C. time, the Pentagon time. So we had a satellite set up on the roof of the building, and we were transmitting imagery that was shot on film negative, transparency slides, you know, and still video. Actually, we had the first ever digital camera made by Kodak. And so you took those digital images and all the others and scanned them in and made them digital files, and you had to get that back to Washington, D.C. So you had certain briefing times for the chairman and Joint Chiefs of Staff, whatever the case may be. So we had a lot to do because we had a photojournalist or a documentation photographer and a videotape camera person on every airplane. And so the guy that made the assignments, photo assignments, or all the assignments for me, was a fellow photojournalist and senior master sergeant. We were friends. And I said, you got to get me on a one-day mission into Russia. I said, I can't be away from here too long, you know. And so he said, okay, I'll work that out. So he did. And the next thing you know, I'm going on a flight to Leningrad. Now, that sounds great and everything, but we had to be there at 3 in the morning and all that because, you know, time change over there, you know, and it was a 4-hour flight, you know, all these aspects flowing in, and you had to land and offload, and you had to document all this stuff going on. And then you got back on the airplane and came home. Well, I did that, and it was great, and I got to put my feet in Russia. You know, that was my goal. Yeah, one of those bucket list things, sure. Get to Russia. You know, so that was an opportunity, so I took it. And so towards the tail end of this deployment, which lasted about 7 or 8 weeks, he says, we got some add-on missions, and I put you on one. And I said, really, where to? He said, Moscow. And I said, oh, wow. But you got to spend the night. I said, Bill, I didn't want to do that. Just do it. Just do it. We're at the end here. I'll watch over everything, you know. And so I said, okay, so I did it. So you had to leave first thing in the morning, and you landed in Moscow around about 9:30 in the morning, and you sit on the airplane. This is in January. It's freezing cold. The airplane shut down. We're at Moscow International Airport, at the most remote part of the airport you can get to, because it's a military aircraft. They didn't want it in the sight of everybody else. So you get off the airplane, the State Department meets you, and then you go through all the necessary stuff to get cleared by Russians to get out and get you to the hotel, so because you have to have 8 hours uninterrupted crew rest. So this happened over 30 years ago. I guess I won't get anybody in trouble now. So we got to the hotel that they had set aside for us, the State Department, and a couple of us noticed there was a shuttle schedule to Red Square. You're supposed to go to bed. And so the State Department left, we're getting our rooms, and everybody's talking to everybody and saying, I'm going on the shuttle. I'm not going to pass this opportunity up. Because we had to meet again at 5:30 or 6:30 at night in the State Department in the lobby, ready to start our trip to wherever we were going. So that was the night we had to spend there. And so everybody, the whole crew, we piled on the shuttle, and we went down to Red Square. Went and saw Lenin's tomb, walked Red Square, got in the cathedral that you see at the end in all the TV shots, the turnip top towers,
Yes.
Went through all that. And so we go back to catch the last shuttle back. Oh, the world's largest McDonald's was opened there. And so we kind of walked by it, but the line was so long, we didn't even want to challenge it, so we ate on the economy. But then we got the last shuttle back to the hotel. So you get an hour or so of sleep and you wake up. To calm everybody down, there was more than one pilot. We had extra pilots on board so they could rotate. And we met the State Department. They took us out, and then we had to meet 2 Russian navigators. Because we were going so deep in country, if we had a problem with the airplane, where do you put it?
Right.
They had all the the maps and knew all the locations and everything else. So we had to have 2 Russian navigators with us. And so once we did what we needed to do where we were going, we were flying nonstop back to Frankfurt, Germany, and that's where the navigators would get off, and then they would fly commercial back to Moscow. So we're going out there, and we're all huddled together. We briefed, and then we go out to the airplane, and the aircraft commander says, we're not going anywhere. We got a flat tire. And so everybody, well, what are we going to do? You can't run to the other side of base and get a tire that's going to fit a cargo airplane. So we have to call back to Germany and report the problem and get a new tire. Well, guess what? To get the clearances and everything, that took 2 days.
Oh, my goodness.
And they didn't put one tire on that airplane. They put a bunch of tires on that airplane. They put a couple of mechanics, jacks. You have to jack the airplane up and change the tire and everything else and everything. So, we did all that. And but in the meantime, we got to go into Moscow again. I got to spend some more time in Russia, and I rode the subway there, the Moscow subway. Went to some markets there. It was, different, to do all that, but it was a good time. And then we finally did the mission. We flew in country, and we landed at a base that had no lights. So we had to land and take off in daylight, and we could only be on the ground for 4 hours. So if the weather was bad and they were weathered in, we had to turn around and go back to Frankfurt,
I see.
with a full load.
Yeah.
But the base was open and clear, so we landed and offloaded the airplane quickly. And we had to have a Russian interpreter on the airplane. It was a Navy guy. And so there was a van there, and we had some time to kill. And so the interpreter worked it out and said, hey, you want to drive into town? And so we said, yeah. So a whole bunch of us, we all crowded into a 15-pax type van, Russian van, and went to town for about an hour, hour and a half. Then drove back out, then flew back to Moscow. To Frankfurt.
You've had some long trips.
I had a good career.
Yes, you did. But you've had some long trips that were supposed to be...
Well, sure, but that's the breaks of the game.
Right.
Yeah.
But yet you did have a wonderful career, and a very eventful career.
Even on active duty, I was on the USS Nassau doing a photo assignment. I was on the USS Saratoga during Desert Storm. So yeah, and it's been multi-service and included in that. So yeah, can't complain.
So how did you communicate with your family during all these trips? I'm sure it changed over time how you
Right,
communicated.
yeah, it's not a lot of letter traffic because how would you send it? So
Mm-hmm.
most of the temporary duty assignments or TDYs were, 3 days, 5 days, 7 days. Even on the Thunderbirds, it was either one weekend or two weekends together, or in the summer we did 3 weekends in a row. So we did multiple air shows in between all that. But and like on the Thunderbird, she got a detailed, literally minute by minute list of where we were, what time we would arrive, depart, everything. So she knew that. In Russia, I just used the phone at the hotel and called back home, kind of things. With a satellite phone in Saudi Arabia and stuff like that. Well, it had to be tested to make sure you're lined up, so you call home, you know, that kind of stuff. So
Yes.
you did that kind of wherever you could work it in, you did it.
Right.
She was very understanding, So
So how did you deal with stress during this time?
oh, probably the most stressful times were on the Thunderbirds when we were being the first F-16 team, and
Right.
getting the team totally operational, doing those first set of air shows because it was a very trying time because that dictated the Thunderbirds. Any mistake and the team could have gone away.
Right.
So and evidently they're not because they're still in the F-16. 30 plus years later. So. They're doing a great job. And then, going to Panama was probably
Right.
stressful.
But what did you do to deal with that stress?
Just you're so involved in your work, you just, try to work it out that way. But sidebar story, when I was in Germany, there was a priest, that was assigned there that we got to know very well, the family. And then I ended up in Panama, and I'm down there, and I hear somebody going around blessing people and everything else like that. And I walk around some equipment, and there's Father Mike, and here we are seeing each other. So that kind of breaks up the monotony of
Yes.
the environment and the environment that we were in,
Sure.
So got to see a friendly face, and but. It's probably when, working those long days and getting, the pressure of getting everything to the Pentagon and the White House, and then the Joint Combat Camera Reception Center was the distribution point at the Pentagon. And so they sent us back pictures of President Bush looking at our work, and briefings and stuff like that. So
That had to be gratifying.
yeah, it was good, So.
What kind of challenges did being away from home create?
Well, I was very fortunate because I had a very loving and strong wife who managed the family while I was gone, and totally understood everything. We always had especially in Germany with the other two photojournalists, the wives, they always did things together, and they had families as well. So, that was a comfort, So she was always around, the structure of the military, and, the base had its chapel, it had its commissary, which is the food store, and the exchange, which is your target, and that kind of thing. So the familiarity is the same wherever you go, so that all worked out well.
What medals or citations were you awarded that are most meaningful to you?
Well, I got 2 meritorious service medals, one from Rhine Mine and one from Norton Air Force Base, my last 2 assignments. Previously to that, I got 5 Air Force Commendation medals for things in my last assignments and that kind of stuff. I got some sort of joint service medal. I forget where it's in reference to right now, but probably the most cherished thing was being on flying status and getting to do that.
And did you get any rewards, or excuse me, let me ask it again. Did you receive any awards for your work apart from the military?
Well, the Air Force Audiovisual Service had a photo contest as well as they had a video and motion picture contest. I placed in that. I applied at the Department of Defense had the Military Photographer of the Year contest. Applied for that a couple of times. Never really did much in that, but that's all right. I had my career, so you know.
You sure did. What was your favorite part about serving?
When you're out there and you're traveling and you know on these temporary assignments, and you're experiencing different countries and cultures and architecture and things of that nature, it's so heartwarming to you know the freedom back at home and coming back to America and seeing and realizing what we have here, you know, and it's worth fighting for and worth defending, you know, to preserve that freedom, because freedom isn't free, you know, as you can quickly see, you know, so it's challenging, but that's probably the thing, is just service to my country, you know.
What was the lowest point of your service, and what did you learn from that experience?
Lowest point maybe is when I didn't make officer off of the Thunderbirds. You know, that I didn't get selected, and there was another person that got selected from the team, and Tim Coy, and he got selected, and he retired as a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. You know, so I see Tim. I haven't seen him in about a year and a half, but there's no hard feelings there, you know. But I look at him and see a lieutenant colonel, and you know, and I'm just a senior master sergeant. But all's well, you know, that ends well, I'm sure.
What did you learn from that experience? What did you take away from that?
Well, I kept trying. You know, I applied for OTS 4 times. The 4th time I didn't get it, so I still reached out. And the biggest thing that I wanted to do was be in charge of my own career as best as I could. I didn't want to, you know, do a military career of 20 plus years and let the computer dictate, you know, where I was going and what I was doing and these kind of things. So if I had any kind of control, I wanted to exercise it. That's why I tried for the special duty assignment. It got me to Colorado, got me to Las Vegas with the Thunderbirds, got me to Syracuse University, you know. And, you know, the one thing about doing Syracuse University, you had to guarantee them 3 years after that, and the only guarantee is that you'd be a photojournalist for 3 years. After that, you go back to the base photo lab and inspire others to do the same that you've done. Well, once you get a taste of that, you don't want to let it go. Yeah, so you know, I'm happy that I left 7 years as a photojournalist, you know, but it probably, you know, could have stagnated in my promotion a little bit, you know.
I see.
So.
What made you laugh?
Good times with friends on the road, you know, the family enjoying Europe, you know, especially the second time, you know, that's very heartwarming.
Did you have any mentors?
Probably the biggest mentor I have had and still have to this day, who I probably talked to just 2 weeks ago, was the chief of photojournalism of the Air Force, is Mr. Ken Hackman. And I got to meet him very early on when I was a parachute rigger. And he helped me, you know, in reference to steering me in the right direction to get selected as a photojournalist, and I eventually did, you know, and then I got to work for him directly, you know, so I worked for him for 4 years, you know. Indirectly, when I was in Rhine Mine, everybody worked. His nickname was the Godfather, so everybody kind of still worked for him, even though you worked for the commander there in Germany, but, you know, under the blankets, you know, it was the Godfather back in California, but then I got to work for him directly, so it was a good time.
What reminds you of your military service? Smells or music or sounds?
Music, obviously, the 60s music takes you right back to Vietnam. And those are the early years, you know. The early years of 70s, that's when I met and married my wife, but instantly when you see the the hats that they wore in Southeast Asia, the local nationals, instantly I go back there. I mean, we had all local nationals on the base, that did a lot of things, did laundry, did whatever. They hired a certain percentage of them, and we had somebody that take care of making our beds and doing our laundry
Sure.
and that kind of stuff. So did that, and not to sound too gross, but the barracks, as I told you, was a slab of cement with some I-beams and corrugated tin, and then there was that building, and then in front of that was the corrugated tin slab of cement bathroom. So you had the urinals on one side, the wash basins here, and then urinals there, and in between all that was the showers, and then the opposite side of that latrine was another barracks. So everybody, it was a community type environment. The only reason I mentioned that is that's where our laundry was done.
Oh, yeah.
The mama sans would come in there, put a sock in the drain, fill up the sink,
Right.
and do our laundry, do it with their feet on the floor in the bathroom, and then spread it out in the sand to dry. So,
Oh, my goodness.
yeah, good old days.
Do you consider yourself a Vietnam veteran in the sense that maybe others who served a tour?
Yes, to answer your question, and I belong to the Vietnam Veterans of America, chapter 1122 here in McKinney, Texas. And you look at it, and in that chapter, I'm next to Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard. There was Coasties that served, over there. There was the Navy was there, offshore, onshore. The Air Force was there, the Army and the Marines. The Army and the Marines did the bulk of it in the
Yes.
jungles, and that's where you got to make your peace with it. Kind of, we're all brothers, military brothers, but at the same time, we were brothers of Vietnam, and they were out in the field, dodging bullets, and I wasn't.
Yes.
But we all had a job to do,
Right.
and my job was keeping those aircraft going, in some way, shape, or form through my parachutes to provide close air support for those people, kind of thing.
Right.
And in my chapter, I've got a couple of Bronze Star winners in there, both Army Purple Heart people, and we get together like brothers,
Yes.
and another good friend, Alan Clark, who lost both his legs. He's a West Point graduate, and so, that is, the deal. It's taken a while to get there,
Right.
because you don't feel like you're one of them, kind
Yes.
of thing. And my commander leader on the Thunderbirds was an ex-POW.
Oh, really?
And he was shot down in his F4, and he went through some of the same trauma that I'm describing now. Is that he was captured and only held captive. Who'd want to be held captive for
Right.
a day? He was around a year, and he got released. In the '73 when they released them all, that he's being released with guys 6, 7 years. He didn't feel like, even though he's a POW, that he was one of them. So, but he's made peace with it, and was very good friends with Sam Johnson, who was it was my my congressman, and so. Yeah, they used to play golf together, do all kinds of things, So, but but Sam Johnson was a 7-year POW or whatever, and I know Sam's daughter and everything else. So,
What other veterans organizations are you involved with?
Disabled American Veterans, Air and Space Forces Association. I do photography for AFA, VVA, these DAV. I'm giving you all the acronyms, and because I'm totally retired, and I do a lot of photography for them, and Now I'm doing MOWW, which is Military Officers of World Wars. I'll be photographing that for them next week. The Collin County Veterans Coalition, I photograph for them as well, you know, and do a lot of stuff there. I also help out as an AFA member, the National Defense Briefing Series that's held quarterly. And it's 5 veterans organizations that get together to talk about current things happening. We did one on infrastructure. They do it once a quarter. And I videotape and shoot the still photography for the guest speakers that they bring in. And infrastructure, meaning the electronic infrastructure, you know, if it was shut down, I mean, everything would happen, you know. Had one on space with General Crippen, if I'm not mistaken. I should know this. Photographed him as a lieutenant colonel, and he was on the first shuttle that was replaced after the Columbia accident. And I photographed him on the rollout of the shuttle, and I photographed him on his first landing out on the dry lake bed at Edwards Air Force Base.
Wow.
And then I'm photographing him at this presentation where he was talking to he was a 4-star general when he retired and was the space commander.
Wow.
You know, so yeah, it was pretty cool.
I don't think I have to ask this, but I'm going to anyway. Would you do it all over again?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Probably couldn't pass the physical, but I would absolutely do it all over again.
I couldn't either.
Yeah, yeah. So, yes.
So what have you done, other than the veterans organizations that you mentioned, what have you done since you left the military? What employment
jobs?
have you had?
When I left, I went to work for Kodak, Eastman Kodak Company,
Okay.
the film manufacturer. I was the government account representative there. And then I was out, I had a territory to cover, and it was all very much electronic imaging because Kodak was very heavy into the electronic imaging. And I was driving back from Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana. My phone went off, and somebody asked me, "Hey, would you be interested in working for Nikon, the camera company?" I said, "Who is this?" And it was one of the senior VPs. I was told to give you a call, and I said, "Okay, I'm interested." And so this was a Friday afternoon, 5:30, and I'm driving back to Dallas, and so. He said, "Can you be here Monday morning?" I said, "Sure."
Wow.
So I had to, talk to my boss about getting Monday off, and so I flew to New York. I flew to Long Island. Well, New York. Melville, New York. Melville, Long Island.
Okay.
And went and interviewed, and then they said, "You got the job." I went back, gave 2 weeks' notice to Kodak, and then went to work for Nikon. For 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I did 8 years with Kodak and 15 years with Nikon.
Goodness.
Then I retired.
What impact has the service had on your life?
Huge impact. Big growing up at 17 years old. It's probably cliche to say, made you a man. And you learned a lot. And you became very organized, very efficient, and great environment. People accuse me of lining up my shoes to this day. It's kind of thing. So it kind of sticks with you, and you have a good time. But it molded me and made me who I am, especially being at 17 years old.
So what advice do you have for young people who are entering the military?
The biggest thing that I would say is go in with an open mind, number one. Number two is there's so many opportunities out there, and there's so much electronics involved now. So anybody that's doing anything electronic, gaming or what otherwise, you would fit right in. It's like a hand in glove kind of operation. Yes, you got to put up with travel and deploying and things of that nature, but that's all part of growing up, and making you a better person, and you get to see different people and cultures and countries and things of that nature. It's a tremendous opportunity. And you don't have to stay 23 like I did.
Right.
You can do 4 years, and then get out, or do 4 years and join the reserves and continue on. The best thing, is obviously since it's a little different now with how retirement works and certain benefit packages work in reference to that, but I'm retired, and I have medical care for the rest of my life, guaranteed to me. I can go on all the bases and shop at the commissary and the exchange. I can fly space anywhere in the world, it's so those are different opportunities, but not necessarily have I elected all those to use all those, but they're all available to me. And being right now and is retired and over 65, it's mandatory for Medicare, and then I have the military TRICARE for life to take care of the balance. So, surgeries or this or that or secondary insurance plans don't impact me whatsoever, so. But yeah, it's a great time. I served with some great men and women, and they're all very successful in their own way, shape, and form in their own individual career fields after the military. So,
Well, is there anything that you'd like to add that we haven't discussed?
It's a great career that had a lot of, certain ups and downs, but more ups than downs. Quick Bob Hope story, I guess, that involves my wife. But when you follow them on a golf course, they give you a golf cart, obviously, to follow them around with. And so one day I worked it so my wife she wanted to see him. She had to see him. So I wasn't shooting him that day. Somebody else was. So I got it so she could ride with the photographer and see him. And then on another trip that he came, I was photographing him. My wife says, I got to see him. I got to see him, And so I said, well, I've got to photograph him at a restaurant. And we don't want to, I got to do it with the general. I'm in a suit, not a military uniform. And so I said, okay, you can go and just watch, as he comes in or whatever, and then make yourself scarce, And so I get there with her, and we're greeted at the restaurant. And the restaurant was closed for a private party, which was the Air Force Academy party that had and included Bob Hope. And so she says, I'm the restaurant owner. Why don't you come on in? Oh, is this your wife? And everything. Get all that nicety out of the way. And then come on in. So she takes us into a room and opens the door, and there's Bob, his wife Dolores, Hope sitting there talking to the chef. The chef was her husband. So all of us were sitting at the table chatting, and my wife was eating it up to beat the band. And the next thing you know, the door opens again, and the general walks in with his party and says, Sergeant Nugent, are you having a good time? And I said, yes, sir. He says, good. And so then I had to start taking pictures. My wife left and waited for me outside, and then I thought for sure I was going to get a call from the general's office the next morning, and I didn't, and that was a different but fun time, so, but it was, I had a wonderful career, as I mentioned, so I can't think of anything. I could probably think of one or two more war stories, but, I'll leave you with the Bob Hope one. So.
Right. Well, thank you so much for
My
agreeing
pleasure.
to be interviewed.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
So. Really appreciate all the time that you've taken to do this.
Happy to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.